crucifixion. He blocked the pain, as he had learned to do in Tibet and India. He also learned to slow his body processes down to the point where they were undetectable. They thought he was dead. So his followers pulled him from the cross, placed him in a cave. His body normalized as he had trained it to. He attempted to go away undetected, but some devotees were standing watch. Tried to explain. They were ecstatic. Thus I was resurrected. I ascended to Central Europe to get away as far as possible.
You don't mean a word of this, John. My God, why are you doing this?
Let me see your wrists. I don't scar. Besides, they tied me, but nails and blood make better religious art.
Now, that was a scene from a movie called A Man from Earth. Basically, a Neanderthal man was somehow gifted immortality, and he was, every 10 years at this point, he would move. And his friends were inquiring as to why he's moving. And then when they asked about historical figures, because they didn't believe that he had immortality, they brought up Jesus. And the thing about it, I found that in this movie, that is probably the best explanation for a historical Jesus that I've ever heard. Not that he was this man, this Cro-Magnon man or Neanderthal who lived for 14,000 years. No, not that part of it. But the way he said that during that, this Jesus character could have learned from Tibetan monks or Buddhist monks, period, because we do know historically that in and around Nazareth was a Roman rock quarry, and that there were Buddhist people who lived in that area, because there was an exchange ever since the time frame of the Babylonians, an exchange between the people in the Indus Valley with the people in the Levant. So it's very plausible, and we have evidence of them there being Buddhists in that area during that time frame. But so it's possible that the Jesus narrative could have been coming from a person who had learned to be a monk, and monks do go through a process of learning how to control their breathing to almost appear incapacitated or dead. Now, some of the plot holes that many might automatically see with this storyline is, one, what about the Spear of Destiny? What about them stabbing him in the side to make sure that he was dead? Well, just as your Bible says that usually the Romans would break the legs of a person on the cross to make sure that they are dead, but they didn't break Jesus' knees. If you can assume and make the conclusion that his legs weren't broken, then we can make the conclusion that he's never been stabbed in his side either, because I doubt very highly even the most well-trained person can ignore being stabbed in the side. But we also know that many people were not nailed to the cross, that they were most of the time tied to the cross, especially those who were put up for punishment without the expectation of death. What many people don't understand is that the crucifying someone was not always a death sentence. Hence, one of the reasons why families gathered around the person who was on the cross, and they come there and they have water and they have food and they have sticks. And the reason being is because a person may be sentenced to be on the cross for 3 days, and it's the family's responsibility to keep the birds away. It is the family's responsibility to give them sustenance. So we do see in the scenes that is created by the Bible that the people were around, that they gave him sponges or cloths with vinegar and water or some mixture, wine and things of that nature. So was he crucified for death or just as a punishment for being an insurrectionist, especially if this happened during the time frame where Pontius Pilate was being criticized by Rome for his cruelty? So was it death or was it just a punishment? Many, just as similar as in medieval time frames, someone would be put into the stocks in the middle of the town square for 3, 4, 5 days as a sign of punishment and embarrassment for whatever crime they committed. So every crucifixion didn't denote the death penalty. So he could have been just tied. Just as the nailing to the cross and the blood makes for greater art, so does the spear of destiny. Now, also, there was the other plot hole. Well, how did he move a rock away by himself? Well, here's the thing about that. If you go to Israel, as I have been twice, and you go out to where uh, the grave sites were in the side of hilltops, one of the things that you will recognize is that many of the graves, when they were first put there, do not have rocks in front of them. And you will understand the culture that when they first put a grave in, they do not put rocks. Why is the question? Why do they not put rocks? And you see this in your own biblical story. When Jesus was accosted by Martha and said, "Come, your friend Lazarus has died. Come and help Lazarus." Oh, and he waited 3 days. Most Christians only focus on the fact that he waited 3 days because in their tradition and in their beliefs, they thought that a person may rise within 3 days because the person may not necessarily be dead. It wasn't considered a resurrection, but this is why the Jesus character waited past 3 days, because in their culture, if you lie there for 3 days, then you are then considered dead. But if you are in the cave for 3 days, guess what they don't do on day one or day two or day three? They do not put a rock in front of it. The rocks are usually placed afterwards. Usually families will gather at the grave site to keep wolves or other animals, birds from going in and desecrating the body. And so that is why you have Mary Magdalene and, well, depending upon which version of the resurrection you read, you got Mary Magdalene and a couple of women, you got Mary Magdalene and a few women, and with Salome, then you got her with some people, with some other disciples. You got a different version on all four gospels as to who was there. Mary Magdalene is the only consistent person who was there. But they usually didn't put stones over the graves or cover the graves within the first 3 days because the person could get up. If you notice, even in the Jesus story, on that fourth day when he showed up to Lazarus' grave, there was no stone. He just called out, "Lazarus, get your ass up." And Lazarus came a walking out because there was no stone, because of their belief that you had 3 days to make sure that you're dead. So there is no stone to roll away. That's just added to the story. If that version of what my man said was correct, then the man from Earth, or yeah, I think that's the name of the movie. But I think that is more plausible than some fictitious God man who is curing diseases and walking on water and feeding 5,000 people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 pieces of fish. You know, it's not balanced. You need a little more fish for all them 5 loaves. But you know what I'm saying? It's more plausible that someone was just a great teacher trying to teach peace, trying to teach love, and then was punished for it, but not sentenced to death. But when they thought he was dead, they decided to create these narratives. And the more extravagant the narrative is, the more believable, more people believe it. Just look at your gospels. Jesus becomes more miraculous as each story is told. From Mark to John, he gets bigger and bigger, like a big fish story. So is it possible that he was just a guy who was saying we should love our neighbors, and then he got legendized? I'm not saying that movie is true, but it brings up an interesting point. So y'all have a great day. And always remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.